Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio, the NBC Network, the BizWorld channel. We're going to talk about a lot of things with my guest today, and more specifically, her latest book. I mean, she's an author, she's a coach, she's a speaker. She's been doing quite a bit in the world of executives and leadership, and focus in healthcare as well. So, one of the most respected voices in executive leadership, Dr. Linda Henman. She's a trusted advisor to some of the world's most influential companies, including Avon, Estee Lauder, Emerson, and Tyson Foods. And she's the founder of Henman Performance Group and the author of and co-author of 11 books. That's a lot of books, Doctor, including her latest, Healthy Decisions, Critical Thinking Skills for Healthcare Executives. And we're going to spend some time discussing that particular book and the content within. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it is a pleasure and honor. And, I don't know where to start. There's so much stuff that I could take from you here today. There's a lot of stuff to share with our audiences. I mean, it's going to touch on a lot of things. And when we talk about leadership, executives, and companies, and critical thinking, and the book itself, and healthcare, I mean, we can talk for hours, and we only have an hour. So I'm going to try to see what's our angle here and how we can make the best out of it. But before, I always, start the show by asking you a little bit about your background. And, obviously I give a little, introduction, but it's never doing justice. You will do a better justice to that, and share with us and audiences a little bit about your story and, your work. I mean, you've done quite a bit. I mean, you got some of the top companies, to higher levels of execution and success. So let's talk about all that, and then we can deep dive into maybe a little bit of the books that you've covered and co-authored, and certainly, we'll spend the majority of our time today with the new Healthy Decisions book.
That sounds good. Well, I started off as a teacher. The first half of my adult life, I was in the classroom, and I've taught every grade 3 through graduate school. And then I went back to school myself to earn a PhD. And I've been very interested in decision-making all along. Why do some people make good decisions? Why do some people make better decisions? And why do people sometimes just seem incapable of getting a decision right? And so I wanted to know, how can people bounce back from resilient and become resilient, especially after adversity? So I decided to move to Pensacola and join the Navy's study of the Vietnam prisoners of war. And while I was there, I suspected that communication played a big role in their being able to return without much post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, just to give you a little context, in the wars prior to Vietnam, the instances of PTSD were very high, 4 to 6%, 75 to 90%. But when I studied the Vietnam prisoners who were imprisoned in the North, I found that they only had 4 to 6% of PTSD, which, to give you a little reference, in the major cities, in St. Louis right now, people are walking around with PTSD at about the same rate that these POWs experienced it, even though they were in captivity for 7 years and longer. They were tortured, they were starved, they were beaten, they were isolated. And I kept saying, why? And what do I need to learn to teach my clients about this? How can you bounce back from adversity? And of course, that led to my interest in helping healthcare organizations bounce back from COVID. So what did I learn from the POWs? They taught me 3 basic things. I said, why are you resilient when so many others who have been in captivity are not? And they said, well, first of all, we believed in something bigger. So it was their families, the United States, their patriotism, their military organizations. And they thought that they had to return home because some of them said, I'm not going to have my son grow up without a father. And then they said that part of this was a connection to each other. I owe it to the other POWs to be resilient so I can help my friends, so I can help the other POWs. And so that was the first one. The second one was, they said they had a deepening of religious fervor, that whatever they were, Catholic, Baptist, Methodist, it didn't matter. They said that they started to trust God because they had no control of anything that they were was happening. And then the last one, which was the most fun to talk about, was they said humor helped them, that they created humor in a situation that was not funny. And so I started asking myself, how can I take these lessons that these men who were in captivity, and they came home in 1973, so they've been home for more than 50 years now. What lessons can I take to my clients? And that has framed all of my research since, all of my writing since. And in fact, I have a novel that I hope to come out next year that is about the Vietnam prisoners of war. It'll be my first novel, and it'll sit side by side with my 11 other business books. So that's a little about me and how I got here.
Well, that's a long journey and a lot of powerful stuff that we can really, I want to dive in quite a bit there. I mean, there's so much stuff. And, I'm going to just break it down a little bit if you don't mind. So first things first, just your story alone. You started as an educator, and as you said, I love it. You started from, early on, elementary, all the way to the top of education. But then you wanted to do more and kind of went into your own journey to learn more about, more business opportunities and how to help, in various areas and levels, right? And then you started writing these books to kind of assist and help, with resilience, with bouncing back. And you deep dive your journey more into the POWs. Now, that is first of all, I want to say amazing, because there's quite a bit of trauma that happens. You talked about PTSD. Just normal people have PTSD, and sometimes available to us through a lot of things that we go through in our journey. But you went to maybe some of the highest levels where you would expect that's way crazy numbers, right? As you stated, the sad thing, well, not the sad thing, the amazing thing is that, it's a small percentage considering the magnitude of problems that they were facing when they were in captivity, especially the Vietnam Wars, right? And that's just an amazing piece. Because just Doctor, we've had multiple shows and we've addressed PTSD and trauma in general, especially law enforcement and military and stuff, which is big. We have a lot of veterans that are in the nation and worldwide, by the way, that have experienced, a level of PTSD. And we have PTSD for different other types of reasons that happen, accidents, trauma, and all this stuff. You also talked a little bit about the idea of that post-COVID, and you focused on the healthcare specifically to help them kind of how to rebound, how to come back, from difficult, times and difficult, I guess, scenarios of life. And frankly, COVID was a big one, right? That's one thing I think the world was not prepared for well, I think at the turn of the previous century, we had similar with the Spanish flu. And again, these are big events. You had the world wars. You can never expect what's going to be next as a big, event that can change the world. And you know what? Just when you don't think about it, something, God forbid, happens, and then the world has to adjust. And some people have the ability to adjust well. Some people may not have equal opportunity, or maybe they don't know how to cope with it, the same way. You talked about the idea of how executives, make decisions. Some do better than others. And there's a reason behind that. There's some way that these people cope. And love what you said. Even those POWs that had the worst captivity, torture, everything, but they figured out ways to manage. And I think that's the biggest thing. People have difficulty managing tough times. We all are human. We all have difficulty sometimes facing realities. Sometimes we are put into a position where it's difficult times. And again, as you said, you've learned quite a bit, and you use that now to coach and help. And you've worked with executives in large companies. That's the big thing. And of course, your books are all inspired by these things. So that's just kind of a little bit of a summary of what was, at least from your story. And now let's really go into the world of POWs, and what are some of the key findings that differentiate? And by the way, POWs are not, what are the things that really make the difference between someone making it and someone not making it, mentally or physically, in terms of dealing with everything that gets thrown at us in this world? Because we get a lot, there's no way for us to be 100%. You can have trauma just in the streets, in an accident, for example, right? People go sick and, maybe they lose a loved one, whatever, and things can go bad, right? There's relationship trauma. There's all kind of stuff. mental health is a big deal, and certainly we get affected fast with things that are around us. But so in your journey, in the work you've done, and all the studies and all the books that you put together, especially the business ones, how does that work? What are some of the measures? But also, how does that relate to real executives and leadership in real world that are not facing any trauma in terms of the magnitude of POWs, but really in life, I mean, in business, is there trauma? So let's go into this discussion.
Well, what distinguishes me from other authors who write about leadership is I make the tie between leadership and resilience, and decision making is part of all that. So leadership and critical thinking skills that help you make the decisions. So going back to the Vietnam prisoners of war, they had then Navy Captain Stockdale, and they had Air Force General Robbie Reisner, they had exceptional critical thinking skills, and they figured it out. So when you think about when people feel most vulnerable, it's when they can't figure it out. So you go into an unfamiliar situation, nobody has taught you how to handle it, and you have to figure it out. That is scary. And it's really scary if you know your decisions are going to affect everybody in your chain of command. If you're the CEO or somebody in the C-suite, literally hundreds, if not thousands of people. My biggest client was Tyson Food, and I worked with 7 other psychologists to help them after they had bought international beef products. And our job was to pick the leaders. So we looked at the Tyson people, we looked at the IBP people, and then they had redundancy. So they only needed one CFO. They only needed one VP of HR. They only needed one of some of these things. But they wanted places for everybody. So we had to go through and assess what needed to happen for the future of this merged organization. And one of the things we looked at, and the thing that I was most observant about and committed to, was finding the people who had the best critical thinking skills. Because this combined company was facing problems that no one had taught them to solve, and things that they have never done before. So from that experience, I learned quite a bit about what it takes for people to lead organizations and the critical thinking skills they have to have. So what do I mean by that? Critical thinking skills help you get to the core of the problem. So if you said to somebody, what's the problem? They might start telling you all of these tangential kinds of things. And instead of saying, so if I said, what's the problem with our inner city schools? You might start saying, well, parents aren't involved, or they don't have enough funding, or their teachers are leaving too much and they have too much turnover. You could say a lot of things. I said, no, in one sentence, the problem is many of our inner city schools students are not performing at grade level. And if you go say, that's the problem, then you can make better decisions about fixing it. Similarly, if you're running an organization, you have got to dispassionately look at something. It's not what you want to do. It's what does your logical thinking tell you needs to be done. So it helps if you learn quickly, but learning ability and cognitive and critical thinking skills are 2 separate gifts. If you go to good schools and you have a certain talent for math, for example, you can learn calculus and you can learn formulas and you can learn to apply them. So taking the area of the room that I'm sitting in or the room you're sitting in is the same formula, whether we're in New Jersey or St. Louis. But if you put us into a situation where no one's given us a formula, can we figure it out? And that's what healthcare leaders are looking at now, because COVID changed everything, and a lot of things were kind of a mess to start with. So what do these leaders have to have going forward? And I have a vested interest in this because I'm a baby boomer, and as we go into our senior years, we're going to have more demands put on the healthcare system that is already in trouble. So that's a little background about how I landed on this tie between leadership and critical thinking skills and how the two have to march in lockstep precision.
Doctor, so I've been in the corporate world for over 30 years, literally. I do some consulting now. in addition to this. And I've run companies, but also run divisions. I've worked with the C-suite. And not everybody that is in a position sometimes has the ability to be in a position. Now, I just want to clearly state that, because a lot of people are put in positions, but they may lack some of the, I guess, the skills or the critical thinking skills, even though they have the authority. I mean, they have position of power, authority, but maybe they're not able to handle or make the right decision. I've seen that, and by the way, I'm not just the only one. Anyone watching or listening, you've probably seen companies that go down the tube because someone made the wrong decision. In the business world, for example, we have, it's very funny because a lot of companies have disappeared because they were not able to adapt to technology, for example. And they were basically obsolete, and good example, Blockbuster, for example, on Netflix, right? Just an example, right? The decision was available to them to be able to get with the program and now adopt this new technology. And, the future is here, but they were not seeing that value, and therefore they made the wrong decision and they were gone. And by the way, this is, it's not even, it is a fact. It is actually, if you do study business, this is an example that's usually given in the discussion and the studies and the case studies. But I actually watched an interview with the owner of, the CEO of Blockbuster then, and he actually admitted that that was not a very, I guess, good, ideal decision that was made, and therefore it was a missed opportunity. And there's many of those opportunities that have, been in the public eye as really critical thinking versus not. I mean, had they look at it from the different angles and see like what's going on, how can we do this and make it in transit? Because now you affect a lot of, and you said something powerful. When you are put in a position of authority, especially leadership, you are in charge of a lot. Whether you're it's funny. I had a captain of the Air Force as one of my leaders in a corporate level. So he was a senior in the corporation, but also had a background in Air Force, and he was a captain, and he had teams and squadrons to actually oversee. And it's all about command and control. It's all about decision making, and every little decision you make can make life or death, right? Things are very critical. And so I learned, I mean, he's still my mentor. I mean, I love that guy, but a lot of stuff, that you find in the military discipline, systems is applicable to the corporate world. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of, corporate training that actually, is driven from the military, world, right? Because the way the structures are, the ranking, this, that, the way you handle situation, even situation rooms, command center, command and control, these things are real things. But there are individuals that, as you said, they can be highly educated, and there's nothing wrong with that. As you said, we can all get the information, we can go to good schools and everything, but how do you apply in real life? And we see this in moments of disasters, for example, right? People lose it. They don't know what to do. Some people can't handle a decision, make the right one. Some people don't have the ability to do it. So what makes someone really, fix it and make it work? And what makes someone really misses the opportunity? I mean, these are real examples we can see and can relate to, but in your experience, is there any differentiator between one? Like you and I, for example, we could be at the same position, right? And we might look at things from different angles, right? It could be our mindset, it could be the way we see things, it could be just you have more experience than I have, and maybe you're like, I've been there, I've seen this. There's a way to do this, and I'm like, no, you can't do this. And we see that a lot of times where you have two different views, and one of them can really get things and get to the finish line, and the other one is caught in the authority or the power stuff, and they are not willing to see the big picture. So what would you say to that?
If you want to be in the C-suite, you cannot let your ego interfere with your effectiveness. So, for example, I do a lot of C-suite selection and succession planning. And often I run into a brilliant person to lead an organization who is perfect in every way, except he lacks quantitative ability. He can't use numbers to make decisions. He uses words to make decisions. So then I tell the board, if you have a really good CFO and this guy is willing to listen to the CFO, you're going to have a dynamic team. But you mentioned the Air Force, and that's music to my ears because I'm an Air Force brat. And my dad flew in 3 wars. He's one of the few people who could say that. He was a brilliant thinker, but he never made decisions by himself that required the input from other people, because there are too many moving parts, too many variables, and you, as smart as you are, you cannot do everything. Now, that doesn't mean you abdicate or you delegate major decisions. It means you listen to the smart people that you hired. And by the way, you should hire people who are smarter in ways than you are. So if you're big picture, hire detail-oriented people. If you have, as many of my candidates do, they're engineers and they're accountants, so they can have analysis paralysis. And I said, you've got to speed up. If you're going to be in the C-suite, you can't take forever to go over this spreadsheet. You've got to speed up. They don't want to, but they have the ability to. So they have to put aside, that's the way I've always done it. I really like to take my time and make things are perfect. I said, you don't have time for perfect. When you're 80% ready, move, because you will lose so many opportunities trying to get that other 20%, which, by the way, you'll never get. So speed up. Ask for help when you need it, and quit worrying about your pride. It'll just make you trip up.
Well, Doctor, thank you. I mean, like, I'm smiling really, because you just hit on a few things here. Well, one of them, I think you said it. The perfect thing is that humans have an ego and pride, and sometimes that comes in, on our way. I mean, it really is a blockade, and many people don't know how to check that out, and they get into that. I mean, obviously, a lot of people in the C-suite, or actually people in general. I mean, we hear about the alpha world, right? There's a lot of alphas in the room, right? So there's a lot of, energy that is there. And everybody wants to be the one that makes that top decision, who has the final say. But you're right. If you're really a true leader, and by the way, I think Steve Jobs quoted exactly what you said, that we hire people to tell them to tell us what to do, not to tell them what to do. And you have to hire people that are eventually even hired better than you in their skills. And you can lead, and you can have a bunch of, people that are smart to do things, because you know how to guide maybe the big picture. But these are the experts, and you give them and you allow them. So there's a way to do this. Leadership, I think that's the thing between sometimes what we refer to as bosses and leaders. Leaders know how to do that. You're right. It's not about, to your point, I love that. You might be not the smartest guy in numbers, but you have a partner that is a good number, and you make a super team. And that's really what it is. Leadership is about team. I mean, literally, and that's what, the whole relationship with, military and stuff, the captain or the general, whoever the top brass is not going to be it without the rest of the team, right? Without the platoons or the squadrons, whatever the team that they have. It's the whole idea that one person is the success of a leader is really the team, is the company, is everybody else. You mentioned something earlier about when you merged like Tyson and these other brands, right? You're right. Like there's only one room for one level for every level, if you want, a VP, an SVP, an EVP, whatever, a chief, right? But then you have these two people, like, I mean, we see this a lot of times when mergers happen and acquisitions happen. Maybe an acquisition I can see it, like, the one that bought has the upper hand. But when you merge, I mean, you have talent on both sides. How do you work with that? Can you find a way to utilize all the talent that's out there in the right position? And many times, and I've seen this happen, people are hired with a certain type of skill, but they put in the wrong role. And, they just fail. But you change them and put them in a better role, or the role that really they fit the best, they get better. A good example you said is, someone is, they have the analysis, they want to go detail to everything, but it may not work in a boardroom and a level where you have to go like, high end, here's what we need to do, boom, boom, and let's do it. You said it best, 80%, you're way ahead of the game. I mean, there is no plan that is perfect when you start. I mean, I don't think there is one that ever has been documented to date. Maybe if there is one, we'd love to hear about it. But the fact is, you got to start. This is actually a mistake that happens a lot with people making decisions in terms of business. I want to go in business, but I can't start. Why not? Well, I got to have everything perfect. I love what you said. There's no such thing as perfect. You're not going to have it perfect. And by the way, plans change every, step of the way. Oh, I didn't think about this. Maybe there's a better way. There's new technology, and you have to adapt. You got to keep moving. And these are some of the things. So I love that the concept that you said that, you have the ability to recruit other people or to match other people, and you can balance things. But I think the powerful key here is check that ego, as you said. I think that's our problem. We all have pride, and we all it gets on our way, and we think that, well, it's my thing. If they don't want to agree, boom. It's like relationship. I mean, right? It takes two to tango, as they say. We can't just do it my way. Like, it's my way and your way. Let's see how we can do it. And by the way, true leaders, they actually listen to their teams. I mean, they really are good. Yeah, you can delegate some tasks, you can delegate functions and whatever, but it's really, how do we do this? You walk in a good, and by the way, I watch a lot of, uh, military movies and also like sports movies and by the way, people say, oh, it's just movies. Some of these movies are really good for training purposes and stuff, especially leadership decision making. And we start thinking about it, it's like, well, how do we do this? Team, it's open, everybody gets, by the way, sometimes we undermine someone that could be in the trenches with us in the company that has so much to offer, but we don't give them a chance to even speak up. That's one problem that, sometimes we see, we don't involve everybody to make a decision. Sometimes you give decision, but they don't listen. I mean, I've seen that happen in person. I mean, I've worked in the corporate, and you like, folks, if we don't change X, Y, Z, nothing's going to happen. And I can tell you, until today, some of these places are in the same predicament because they haven't changed what we've talked about. You change things, that's the only way to do it. And by the way, I'm not saying because I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'm just giving you the obvious, here's what it is based on set of, data and things that we can do. And that's redundant. I see that a lot more. And again, this is what, again, to your point, makes decisions at the highest level work. Now, resilience, how does that tie in? I mean, we're talking about, the act of leading, the act of making the critical thinking, and position all that. But then what does that have to do with resilience? How does that resilience, kind of support this dynamic?
Well, you have to be able to bounce back. But to be able to bounce back from adversity or change, you have to look at things dispassionately. And people who do not have well-developed critical thinking skills are emotional. So whatever it is, if your birthday present doesn't come on time, or you get stranded in an airport somewhere and you miss a meeting, you have got to switch into problem-solving gear immediately. You can't lick your wounds. You don't have time. So you have got to anticipate consequences, and you've got to start weighing options and say, okay, I could call the client and cancel. I could reschedule. I could set up a Zoom meeting that I could do here in the airport. You look at options, and then you start to dig yourself out of it. If you don't develop resilience early on, you're just going to suffer more, and it may take you out. So you talked about they don't understand what change is going to bring. One of the elements of critical thinking is the ability to anticipate consequences. So, and to learn from mistakes. So, nobody's perfect. We make mistakes all the time. But then we say, whoa, that hurt. I don't want to do that again. So you don't make the same mistake twice. You go on and make other mistakes, but you don't make that one again. So resilience is the ability to forgive yourself first, that you screwed up, or you disappointed someone, or you disappointed yourself because you didn't live up to the values that you believe in. If all of that requires an ability to pull yourself back up, and it requires you being, once again, putting your ego aside and asking for help. So back to the POWs. And by the way, I love the way you refer to the military, because as soon as you go into the military, you start learning how to be a leader. You're in charge of something almost immediately, whether you're enlisted or in the officer ranks. Very quickly, you're put in charge of something or other people. So you learn the skills of getting people to follow you. And that is separate from critical thinking skills, but critical thinking skills always help. So you help in the POWs. Torture is an awful thing. And you can be tortured to the point that you will say or do anything. Now, people in the bar will say, oh, I'd never give in to torture. I don't know why those POWs signed those letters denouncing the U.S. I would have never done that. Nonsense. You would have. And anybody who says different has never been tortured. It's only people. And I worked with a lot of POWs, and every one of them, how did you come back from that? And so they relied on each other. They turned to each other and said, I feel terrible. I just gave this information or this intelligence, or I signed this propaganda sheet. And the other guys say, we've all done it. Go in there and do your best tomorrow. And Stockdale was very instrumental in this because after the Korean War, the rules of engagement said you were not allowed to give information, even if you were tortured. And Stockdale expected that he was going to be court-martialed, but he said, do not allow them to do permanent damage to you. Give them what they want. Hold out as long as you can. But if they're going to hurt you mentally or physically, permanently, give them what they want. Then nobody court-martialed Admiral Stockdale, obviously, but they did rewrite the rules of engagement as a result of his leadership because he figured it out. He figured out what his men needed. And that's what great leaders do.
Well, Doctor, thank you. And I love that analogy. I love what you said about the resilience. You're right. I mean, in business in general, things happen, and you got to be a solution mind, meaning that. And by the way, I believe in that personally. Like sometimes people come in like, "Oh, we have a problem." Okay, so you discovered the problem. That's meant to happen. It happened already. Somebody did something and something didn't work out. It doesn't matter what the conditions, we can fix that. But what are the solutions? Because I mean, at the end of the day, we're just not going to be listening to what that problem without having something, because really that's what's going to happen. We need to figure out how to move on from this, right? So that's the first thing. And you talked about the idea to rebound, to really kind of make it back from whatever the situation. And this example of the POWs is the biggest one. I mean, these folks that have been tortured. As you said, when someone is tortured, there's no one that can actually relate to that unless someone who's been in their shoes. I mean, we can think about pain and just simple pain for ourselves, right? You can have a bad day and things can be, bad for you. Imagine if you're being physically, mentally, put to the test. Also, you mentioned something about the idea of like an example when you said somebody at the airport, like something happened. Well, things can happen. Murphy Law is going to be there, right? So we need to figure out a way out of everything. Things happen, we make it work. No matter what the conditions are, you have to figure out a way. You have to be able to balance. And that's really what happens to the best, leaders around the world. Something happens, they don't dwell about it. How do we quick make, the fix and then move on to the next level?
One of the things I like best about my work is high stakes environments. So a CEO calls me with something that's never happened before. And sometimes I'm talking him or her off the ledge. Most of my clients have been men. One of my jobs is to talk them off the ledge and give them a new perspective and help them frame it. But part of my job when things go south is to say, it's not your fault. You didn't cause it. You can't fix it. And it's lonely at the top. And the higher you go, the lonelier it gets. So you need a dispassionate mentor. You referred to your mentor earlier. You need somebody who cares about your success. Not somebody who loves you, but somebody who cares about your success and will tell you when you're on the wrong path and when you're on the right path. So I tell clients what they don't want to hear and what nobody else in the organization will tell them. So if you go into your boss, who's higher up than you are, and you give them good news, and you don't tell them the real problem because you don't want to look bad because your ego's involved, and it seems as if you're the one who messed up. So you don't tell them. On the other hand, you don't go in and say, you don't compliment him because that's seen as apple polishing or ingratiating yourself. So people at the top need help to bounce back, and too often they don't get it.
Well, Doc, thank you. I mean, it is a big thing, and I think that's a great piece to just spend some time on. You're right. People think that you are the leadership at the top. You are pretty much full power. You have everything. You have full immunity. You're solid. You're not human. You're like some sort of bionic entity, right? You're not. I mean, we're humans and we have emotions, and so it doesn't matter what level. As a matter of fact, the higher you are, as you said, you're lonely, but also you have pressures. People don't realize. I mean, by the way, there's no one that's really on top by themselves. There's a board. If not, there is some stockholder or shareholder that's actually in charge of things, right? Things happen. I mean, there's always somebody that's going to look out, down and make, a check on your decisions and stuff. And it gets a little tough, and then you feel like everything is falling on your shoulder. And by the way, truly, they will always feel that they are responsible. Like that's accountability 101. But you're right. If there is no feedback, good or bad, and the way you approach that too. I mean, as you said, by the way, there's nothing, I mean, they have to be open to maybe, criticism, right? Positive criticism. There's nothing wrong with that. You can talk to someone, and I love what you said. Your work is actually to get them off the ledge and listen, good or bad, you tell them what's up and here's what we're going to do and so on. Here's how we move on from this situation. But you're right. It's like I blame me, or the ego comes in, like no one wants to get. By the way, I see this all the time. I mean, in the corporate world, we see it. People try to cover themselves so much, or their departments, because they're afraid of the ramifications. You are operating in a big, it's like a ship. One little small piece that's moving wrong, things can go wrong. I mean, that's the whole how you have to look at it. And so, yeah, something's going on, we address it, but you have to be able to put it on the table. So we discovered something. I mean, sometimes we see that in compliance. Someone messed up and there's a big compliance thing. Well, it happened, right? So you have to put a corrective action plan in place. You have to figure out how to do it, maybe some retrain, whatever. But it's not the end of the world. Things are expected to actually work that way in the real business. There's no perfect environment. It doesn't exist. I mean, things are going to happen. It's a moving thing. Everything that we do, doesn't matter where you are, what kind of business, what kind of level you're at, it's a moving thing. There's different involvements, different people, different, levels where decisions are being made. Maybe the CEO is not always aware about every single decision that's being made in the trends, right? Yeah, there are elements, people that may have a grudge against just their manager, and maybe that's the thing that I need to know, for example, as a CEO, if somebody in my, line is not doing a good job treating the people right. So there's a lot of ways. I've seen CEOs that are way involved, and I've seen CEOs that are completely off. They don't even know people by name. I mean, they walk in like, who's this? Now, I get it when you got 10,000, 100,000 employees, maybe difficult. But I've seen it in small scale, level where, they walk by you, they may not even know your name. So these are some of the things. It depends on who is in charge. But as you said, at the end of the day, they need to be accountable. They need to be able to actually speak up. They need to be able to get the feedback. And, one way or the other, it's the way it is, and we have to be comfortable with that. So thank you for sharing that, stuff. Now let's talk about the decision, the book, Healthy Decisions. First of all, I love just the name. I mean, Healthy Decision, and then it's healthcare executives. So sometimes, again, critical thinking, making decisions, good decisions, healthy decisions. What is a healthy decisions? What is a healthy decision?
And so whatever it is, in healthcare, patient care, your financials, your strategy, your succession plan, we have a whole way, we have an assessment at the back of the book that helps CEOs or executives in healthcare evaluate and assess. What do psychologists do? We measure things. So we're very eager to measure what's going on in your organization. And then we'll tell you what those things are, or you can hire us to help you fix them. So that's kind of our business model going with the book of we'll help you, we'll take a look at what's going on, and then we'll tell you what we think you need to do. Because here's what happens, and I've learned this throughout my career, not just in healthcare, that people perceive things a certain way. So when I go in and do the assessment that my partner and I call the first look, I go in and I talk to people. I give them the assessment, I have them do the survey, and then I'll say, CFO, what do you think's going on with your clean claim rate? And I ask very specific questions. What do you think's going on with documentation? That's under your chain of command. What do you think is going on with denials? What do you think your percentage is? So the CFO will give me some inflated view. My business partner is in another room going through the finances. So at the end of the day, we come together and we go to the decision maker and say, here's what you think is going on. Here's what's really going on. And they will say, oh, our succession plan is really good. And they're not dumb people, and they're not misguided people or bad leaders or any of that. It's that they don't know. And they are relying on the perceptions of other people in their chain of command. So when I work with a new CEO, I tell them two things. First of all, your jokes are going to get a lot funnier. And second, people are going to tell you what they think you want to hear instead of what you need to know. So people don't come to you when they think there will be a problem in sales. They don't come to you unless they've done everything they can to solve the problem. And then they come with their tail between their legs and say, we dropped off by 20% last quarter, and I don't know why, I did everything. Whereas if that same person trusted the leader to receive that information without cutting his head off, then you would find out problems much easier. But the trust has to be there both ways, that the people in the chain of command have to trust the leaders that you're not going to punish the messenger. You're not going to kill the messenger when I bring you this bad news. But the other one is that the people in the C-suite have to trust people will bring them things when they're little problems instead of they get to be big problems.
Well, thank you. And that's a big deal, right? I mean, the idea of people are afraid, from ramifications of such decisions or such errors or problems that they may have in their trenches, and they are afraid to pose that in front of, and I think that's a big deal. Not everybody has the capability of like, hey, listen, boss, I don't like that name, but hey, CEO, this is what's going on here. I mean, that's really the truth. And, we do this, but there are these factors that you might not be aware of because of competition, because of regulations, because of the marketplace. There's all kinds of things that are happening that you may not be privy to. But here's the real fact. We're getting pushback from our providers. I mean, I was in the insurance space, so obviously work with providers. And one of the biggest things that, for example, in our space, especially in the government programs, is that, if your doctors are not happy with, reimbursements or whatever, they're actually basically working against you. That's one way to look at it, right? You're an insurer, you want membership, but the members are not really happy because their doctors are not happy with you. Simple. Now, you can't do nothing about the members unless you can do something about the providers. Sometimes that for example, this dilemma that I just mentioned is a huge thing in our industry. And sometimes it goes in deaf ears. I mean, you really say this is the fact. Other competition, for example, has could benefits that are actually exciting and really intriguing, and people want them. And we're just not, anywhere in the bulk rate here. We're not even matching the competition close by. So there's nothing. Well, all right. So we're going to find things that we have as advantages or different or better. But sometimes that's not enough to actually mitigate the gap in the need and the want of the membership, and therefore you lose. Sometimes we don't do good retention but again, when you articulate that, some leaders will accept it and say, okay, well, let's put a plan together. What can we do? I mean, maybe this year is off. We're going to kind of take our wounds and let's see how we can do this for the next season. But sometimes they're like, oh, whose head's going to roll? And to your point, when people are always afraid about, my job is going to be on the line here, I'm going to try to finagle the numbers, I'm going to do whatever, try to hide as much as, and that's what I've seen happen. A lot of people kind of camouflage, and their stuff doesn't stink because they just want to make sure they have the shield that their department is, and they're always on the defense. I mean, for example, I sat in a lot of operations meetings, and everybody's trying to defend this or the other. So imagine this, I'm in sales, and so we get a lot of pushback and vice versa, right? We're in charge of the numbers. We got to bring the numbers. We got to grow the numbers and the retention, right? And also we do some customer service, and then now we work with operations. Sometimes things may happen, whether from IT, from other service. So these things are real. And so it just, how do we develop that relationship among the team? And I think, to your point, a healthy C-suite will create an environment where this is eliminated. And I think that's really a big deal. And I think your work is important because you can help them see that. And again, to your point, it's not that they don't know. And sometimes they caught up in their own world, and these things are happening behind the scenes. And everybody is good about covering. I mean, the COIA, acronym is pretty common in the business world. Right? Everybody is trying to do that. And what happens is the real story is not that. And by the way, numbers can be skewed. I mean, I'm sorry, I've seen it. Anyone can play with the numbers to show some sort of a good trend, or minimize the damage in the trend. Fact, CFOs can do it. Salespeople can do it. Analytic, folks can do it. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can present the picture in a less impactful way, one way or the other. You want it good or you want it bad, you can still, do that. Those are things, but I think your work is to change the dynamic and get people to be aware. I love what you said about the CFO may have a picture, the CEO may have a picture. That's not the real picture. And that's the other thing, how deep some of the CEOs or some of the C-suite is involved in the trenches. Again, to me personally, top folks are the ones who actually They know about their daily stuff. They have regular meetings. They have stuff. They actually spend time in the field. They actually meet. I've had CEOs actually that go and really meet with trench people, like, literally people that are in the front line, just like you would have a commander, in a general or a colonel, in the army or the air force or something, in with the actual forces out there, to be really to see that stuff. Because seeing, sitting behind a desk in the corporate, headquarters is not going to give you a true picture of what's really going on, and when you go out there, like, oh, wow, this is the real world. I mean, just facing customers, for example, can make a big difference, right? People may not know what's going on behind those counters every day. You got people that are nasty, people that be demanding, whatever. Things can happen that can affect your image, but are you aware of that? I mean, someone says, like, from the front line says, oh, this is what we get all the time, and nobody is listening. That's a problem. And by the way, when I'm giving some of that, this is personal experience, but I think that's actually the reality of the business world in general. Your work is really to identify these things. And I love what you said. One person in the other room seeing the true story, and you get a little bit of a less, picture, right? And so when you match those, like, and by the way, that's a fact. I've done some assessment myself, like, in some consulting, and that's exactly what you find. The pictures are totally different. This is the real, but here's the thing. Are people, in your experience, are people at that level willing to see the truth for what it is and work with it, without, making some drastic decision? I think that's a big question. I mean, have you experienced that, with your clients, for example? Or what would you say to people who are listening in that capacity?
Well, Healthy Decisions is a very pragmatic book. We have been talking for 52 minutes and neither of us has used the word culture. And I'm very excited about that because the word culture has become a conversational shuttlecock. People bat it around as if they know what the other person is talking about, and nobody knows that. What we need is social proof. So, for example, if we are talking about reducing your denials and improving your financial statement, we cite hospitals who did that or healthcare organizations that did that. We look for examples of a hospital that improved their succession plan, and then we look at how many dollars they saved or how their financials improved. So we're always looking for social proof. It's not theoretical. People talk about culture and we want to build a culture of courage and trust and learning and what does that mean? I don't know what that means. It means you need to make better decisions and you need to model the behavior you want other people to model. And you do that by saying, who else has figured this out? And with AI now and online sources and Google and all the other things, there's no excuse for any leader not to know exactly what's going on in whatever industry, not just healthcare. So if you want to know what other company the same size as mine has done this, go to your computer and find out, and then find another one that's not like that. But people stagnate. They don't continue to learn once they get the job they want.
That's a big one. And by the way, that's the golden rule, right? We don't stop learning. The day you stop learning, you're obsolete. You're done. And especially in a time frame where everything is moving fast. And as you mentioned, AI is the future, right? It's here already. It's happening. And you're right. I love what you said. We didn't use the word culture because I think that has been more of a trend in recent years, different, I guess, generation. It's becoming a little bit more of the flavor of the discussion. We're going to create a culture that is, diverse and this. And I'm not talking about diversity in its source of like, who's what where. I'm talking about more like, we need to be more, flexible in certain things and stuff. That has nothing to do with it. You can create all that environment that is positive and stuff. But really, to your point, this is about decision that is tangible, data that is available. Are we up to the challenge here? Are we competing correctly? That's what I refer to. If other people are doing this and you want a piece of the pie, you need to do better. At least the same or better. If you're not there, you're missing. It's over. This is not, a good example. I'm a big cruise fan and I cruise a lot. And cruise ships are like, they're like compete in every single level to be better than the other. I mean, they come up with stuff that is unbelievable. Every company is coming up with these big ships that actually put all the other ships around, to shame. And then the next year you have a new ship that comes up from another company that is like, whoa, they got some other stuff. We got robotics here, we got this, we got that, we got go-karts in stuff. And so, and just a simple example, airplanes are the same. I mean, some of these airliners, I mean, they have these suites up, in the air. And and again, this is beyond healthcare. In healthcare too, I'm talking about hospitals. I mean, I've seen some hospitals that they use technology, they use services. They've had, for example, companionship, that the models that are available where people come in so someone can actually assist them from the family. So they're getting with the program. They're thinking about how can we improve and make the experience better and so on and so forth. Now, the minute you're not in that same wavelength and frequency and you're not caught up with that, new trend or better trend, or be also the innovator, the pioneer, you lose. And by the way, this applies to all kind of businesses. Doesn't matter what they are. If you're not there, you're missing. And to your point, this goes back to what you said earlier, ego. If we have the ego, and you're right, like I know it all. I'm the CEO now. Done. So it's just a thought. By the way, CEOs come and go too. I mean, that's the other thing that people have to be aware. If you don't do a good job, somebody in the chairman of the board has the authority to say, you know what, I sat down in a few boards before, and you do have you're a volunteer, but you have more power than someone that's making, that money, right? You can literally sit down and vote someone out as a CEO. And I've seen that happen. It can happen, folks. So yes, go ahead, Doctor. You wanted to say something?
So you have to challenge assumptions. So you just mentioned cruise ships. I tend to be a contrarian, and you said, they say, well, our ship is bigger, our ship is this. I said, I don't want bigger, I want smaller. And that's what Viking did. And somebody says, well, I want kid-friendly menus, and I want a basketball court and a swimming pool. And adults over a certain age say, we don't want any of that. We want to be able to drink alcohol for lunch if that's what we want. We want an over 18 experience. We want a small ship where we can get to know the other passengers experience. So smart people say, really, is that what everybody wants? Or what percentage wants that? And what percentage wants something else? Great leaders constantly challenge assumptions, even their own assumptions that they assumed were right before. So they challenge assumptions, they look for patterns, they discern differences, and most importantly, they hire other people who have good critical thinking skills.
But I love that. What you said is perfect. And you're right. I mean, what I talked about is just the example of, competition. But you're right. Competition doesn't mean bigger or better. It just means what it is for you. Like, you want to find a niche that's going to work for you. You're right. Viking is Viking. I mean, they had Crystal, and Crystal is gone. But now, I mean, Virgin is doing something similar where it's, no kids. It's a different experience, right? I mean, so there might be bigger ships, but every company is trying to figure out a way that becomes their signature. And that's the other thing. I mean, every company is, there's competition in the industry, but how do you highlight yourself? And this is the difference, whether you're a health plan, you're a healthcare, provider, you're a law firm, you're, an industry, a manufacturer. It doesn't matter. It's how you operate. I mean, I've been to a lot of expos around the world. And you go to these places, I mean, the way they operate, I mean, some of these companies, it's just amazing. Some people are using robots already, and I'm not talking about robots in the machine. I'm talking about robots in interactive stuff. Whatever it is, the key here, as you said, is there's assumptions, of like what you think it is, but there is more things that can be there. And you said it. Hire people. To your point, if I hire someone that may see that Viking concept is the way to go because that's going to open up a new door, well, maybe there's room there. There's not a lot of competition. There's one or two companies. Maybe I can get my way in there and become the next one, right? And no offense, Viking folks, and by the way, I love your style, Viking. For those people that know, those are like small ship, less than 800 people. A lot of them, the European, rivers and stuff. And you go through this, and it's all inclusive, but it's kind of pricey. But if it's a different lifestyle, and you enjoy your life in a different way, smaller ships, less, noise, quiet. I mean, again, but and they actually have, larger cruise ship, in the capacity that is a little better and bigger. But at the end of the day, they're very exclusive. I mean, you have other like Queen Elizabeth, which is Cunard. I mean, they have their own, like high-end dress code, whatever. I mean, every company finds their own signature. Some are like Carnival, for example, is the party ship. They want to have party college students, whatever. So they find angles that make Disney, right? They have their own ships and they have their own signature. The Disney experience at sea. But the key here is, I think your point is really, as CEO, as C-suite or leaders in general. By the way, I know that the C-suite is usually, some companies are smaller. They may not even have a C-suite, capacity. I mean, they just have different titles. They just have maybe EVP or executive director, but they're about the same in terms of what it is. Obviously, you get larger, and then you get, different layers of senior leadership and mid-management and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I love what you said, the concept of military. If you are in charge of one thing, you're already in charge of something that you have an important piece, of action that you have to take that can destroy the whole thing. I mean, to your point, if one person doesn't do a system correctly and they fail on a program or something and the system crashes, everything stops. And therefore we have problems across the stuff. So it's a fine machine that is working across. And this happens at the hospital system. And I love what you said. You mentioned the claims a couple of times. There's penalties to pay, if these things are not happening, for some of these companies, that especially the RCM, companies. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there and everybody needs to know what's there. Now, of course, people, you work in selection, for example, in CEOs and top, C-suite. And there's a lot of vetting that goes into that. Now, there are people, to your point, that may have the quality and the qualifications, but they may not even be seen as such because of whatever reason. So there's a lot of stuff that goes in there. Now, healthy decisions, I love it. Now, the book itself, is it specifically for healthcare executives, or can it be applied to general, I guess, industries and businesses?
At least half of it is general. The only difference between this one and my other one is that all the examples, or most of the examples, are in healthcare,
which is big.
But if you're talking about, if you hire humans, succession planning, hiring, strategy, all of that is going to be, you're going to have a lesson in this book. And it's up to date. And and just because I use healthcare examples doesn't mean you look for social proof in your organization or in your industry. But I just want to encourage everybody listening to this and everybody who reads that book, ask yourself why. Ask when somebody says, well, we want to increase sales. Why? Well, we want to make more money. And I said, well, do you want to increase sales or do you want to increase profits? Because if you get, I worked with an engineering company that was engineering to orders, and their salespeople were out there doing a great job selling, but the engineers couldn't come up with the product. So they were losing frustrated customers who went elsewhere because you said you'd have this by this date, and manufacturing couldn't deliver it. The salespeople were okay, the manufacturing weren't. So you've got to get to the core of the issue. Is it sales? Is it manufacturing? Is it engineering? Is it pricing? What is it?
Well, thank you, Daka. It's amazing that you said that, and it's music to my ears, because sales is one thing, and that's my love and my work. But you're right. Sales is generating the membership, the client base, right? But to your point, that doesn't always equate to profitability, because your product may not be as competitive, whatever price may be wrong. We might do a good job bringing the membership. Maybe you don't keep them because the customer service experience is not really there. There's so many factors, you said, that to your point, the system is not matching up. I mean, you're losing because your operation, you can't get them a membership card on time. I mean, there's many things that I've seen, for example, over the years, where it's an operation that is missing, and therefore it hurts the process. And now we used to track, I always have a retention team, and we track, for example, we call every member before, even I call it preventative or preemptive customer service. So we call members as they join us, before they actually even go through the membership, and just to see the experience, and we want them to have a very easy transition into whatever program we have. And we ask, and eventually when people leave the plan, we kind of figure out, why do you leave the plan? And we find the 5 elements that are actually redundant across the board. And you bring that to the team, to the C-suite, listen, folks, these are the same things. They're coming in every month. And to your point about social proof, this is real. This is what people are seeing, and by the way, we'll match that to the government regulatory, reporting too. We're not even saying this because we're trying to defend our position. This is the fact. This is what's going on. And here's what we can do. Now, here's the thing. Some companies, they listen. And whether they hire, a team that maybe of additional experts, maybe they fill in the blanks or whatever, but some teams they don't do. So I love, your book is, yes, in the healthcare, but it can apply to a lot of areas. And a lot of these businesses are very similar in operation. I mean, maybe the product or the service is different, but at the end of the day, everybody is selling a product or service at the end of period and out. It doesn't matter what it is. You're a hospital. Well, there's services that offer there, right? It's a healthcare concept, but it is manageable. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and how you do it. I mean, you got to do it right with the right team. So what are some of the key characteristics you would give, for people to be in that C-suite, at least based on your experience?
If you're sitting in front of me as a candidate for the C-suite, I'm going to assume that you've lived your career without putting your hand in the till. So I test for other things. I test for cognitive ability, critical thinking skills, quantitative reasoning, learning ability. I test for leadership. Gives 4 personality tests. So what I'm looking for is, do you have a strong can-do attitude? Do you have an achievement drive? Do you take no for an answer, or do you keep plugging away? Do you get along with people? You don't have to be a social butterfly, but are you likable? Because if I don't like you, your clients aren't going to like, other people aren't going to like you either. And do you have the backbone to make a difficult decision? Because what we're learning is that unpopular decisions precede progress. That if you want progress, you're going to have to make some unhappy decisions, and you can't make everybody happy. You've got to do the right thing, and the thing that improves the organization, not what you want to do. So that's what I'm looking for when I do succession planning and selection.
Doctor, you mentioned succession planning many times. I think that's missing in a lot of places. I just don't think that, again, I've been in corporate for a long time, and very few places where that discussion about succession planning was even in place. And it's as sad as it sounds. I mean, you mentioned it, and it's a powerful, expression, but it's big. I mean, everybody moves on, and you do need to have, succession planning. Like, how do we operate in the future? Who's going to be the next, leader? I mean, who's the next, in command? It's all that stuff. And some people are good about that. And by the way, true leaders develop new leaders. Not everybody has that, right? So these are some of the things that, to your point, and I love what you said about integrity. You can't put your hand in there, and you do have to make some tough decisions. It's part of making, being leader. I mean, even at home, not every decision you make is happy and everybody's going to accept it, right? So we do that at home. We got to do it at business. And yes, you take the best of all scenarios, and then you take the outcome that is the most plausible. And sometimes, as you said, if it's 80%, it's bad. We're taking it, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be 100%. This is not like there's an expression. It's not a democracy in business. You can't have a vote on it like, no, we're going to get consensus here. No, that's why it's called executive decision. You have to make a call, and you make the call. Now, obviously, a very smart call has to be sound with information and stuff. It's not going to wing it. We're just going to try this and see what's up. But I love what you said also, is being that different. You might have, like, all these success stories that we hear today. It's decisions that were made, like, we got to do this. Like Steve Jobs, we got to put the computer in your pocket with everything else. I mean, it's like, really? We can do that? Well, guess what? Now we can't live without it, right? I mean, we got Elon Musk, we're going to get these cars, with electrical power and make it work. No, nobody's going to do it. He is there. I mean, there's so many examples historically. I mean, people have been laughed at, when they kind of come up with some new, wow. I mean, AI is a big deal, right? All these stuff, like, we're going to have people that actually, computers that can make decisions. Well, guess what? They're happening now. There's nothing you can do about it. So we have to just understand, but you're right. Not everybody's going to like that. Listen, for someone who has been in the corporate, I mean, I did have actually a C-suite title, so I can speak to it, from that angle. Not a large company, but a company that was owned by a large company. So you deal with some of the same, folks and things like that. But it is a different position, and you do have a different, kind of responsibility at that point, and you have a say in the matter. But again, it takes the whole suite. That's what they call it, suite. It's not one person, and I think when we have I guess, a good frequency, a good vibe between all the members of a C-suite, you get good, vibes, and you get outcomes that are positive. When you have presence in that group that is not really, coherent, and you have a little bit of a challenge, as you said, ego, pride and on the table, it becomes a problem. Who's going to be, the biggest, guy or gal that's going to make the decision? It becomes a problem. But again, folks, this is, I'm not the expert, I mean, I know some of the stuff that I've been in my own world, but I think Dr. Henman is really, this is her thing. And if you are in a position of corporate and you need a little bit of assistance, I think, you should get, in a call with her and see, and her team, and see what can be done. And there's, how does that work, by the way, for you, doctor? I mean, is it a consultation? How does your program work if you want to assist someone or a company?
Well, they call me, or they go visit my website and send me an email. And I'm very approachable. I don't have an assistant answering my phones. You'll get me, and we'll talk about how I can help you improve your organization.
It's very simple. No red tape.
But more specifically, my value proposition is I help senior leaders make decisions they can't afford to get wrong. So if you're facing a decision, if you're a senior leader and you're facing a decision, whether it's hygiene, any of it, I can help you with that. The only thing I can't help you with is technology.
Oh, listen, that's why if they do a good job, they will actually hire the right people anyways.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And then the problem is solved. But that's the thing. I mean, it's really, you helping them get the vision, the picture, get the outline, right? And, you got them in terms of like how to do that. And the rest is history. And, there's plenty of talent out there. I mean, that's for sure. And again, there's adoption of technology also that can help. There's so many things they can do. But you're right. And I love the direct approach. They come to you, you talk to them, you guide them. If there is an appetite, then you guys meet, and then the rest is history. You work with them, you do your assessment, and that's it. But you certainly have put in a lot of work. You have a lot of social proof, in your books. And I'm sure there's a lot of examples that are good, solid, that actually have been documented, that can make a difference. And this is what you do, which means you speak the language of a C-suite. And that's the other thing. It may be a little bit of a sophisticated language, maybe different, than the average discussion that we may have at different levels of management. But it is a very solid discussion. I mean, when you talk, in that level, it's really like, every decision has an actual result that is attached to it, and it has to happen within a time frame, so on, because it's P&L, right? Profit and loss. You're going to get your responsibilities here, and you got to show some sort of because there's no business that is out there without a profit plan. You don't start a business not to be for profit. I mean, yes, you can be a not for profit, but even not for profits make profits. They just, there are surpluses. There are surpluses, right? They kind of refurbish that money for purposes of whatever the mission is. But at the end of the day, no one starts anything, any activity, just because it's like, we're just going to do it for free and, we're going to wing it. There is an actual, consequence and result that is supposed to happen, and that is a profit. And everybody's looking at that. That's where the CFOs come in. But again, that's the other thing. A CEO doesn't have to have all the knowledge that needs to be there, but they have to have the ability to actually gather a team, and the team is really what it takes to get it done. And I don't think who is the best CEO, nothing happens without the rest of the team. The vision may be the CEOs, the leadership, the guidance, and the decision, and the strength of that is that CEO. But really, it's that whole team, and it starts with the C-suites down. And by the way, that's not meaning that they're better than the rest of the team. Everybody in a company is, to me, as equal, because they all have their own responsibilities. And again, one of them, sometimes people may not realize that, it's just an employee. That employee is doing a function that maybe when that employee is not there, there's something missing. That means the workload is not getting done correctly. And that means you're behind schedule, which means it impacts performance and so on and so forth. So guess what? Everybody is equal. And again, a true leader understands those things, and they actually look at all these things. And you have some great examples out there that do that. So well, Doctor, thank you. I know we exceeded the hour, and I love this. I mean, we can spend a couple hours more on this easily. So I will have the information about the book in the description of the show, so people actually can connect, as well as your direct link, so people can actually reach out to you. This will be on the BizWorld channel, and so we're going to try to push it to the people that are audiences. But it is also, I think the discussion is open to everybody that's out there in the States, outside the States. By the way, Do you only operate in the States, or it doesn't matter?
I'm sorry, say that.
Do you operate in the U.S. only, or maybe like if you get customers?
No, I'm international. Yeah, I'm international.
Oh.
Some other ideas. You can send me a connection request on LinkedIn. I post several times a week. Go to my website at henmanperformancegroup.com. I have thousands of pages of free articles on there. Sign up for my free newsletter. There are many ways you can access me before you decide to call. And then I'm hoping that some of those things will prompt the phone call, because I'd love to talk to your listeners.
Listen, I'm pumped just by hearing you. I mean, if I'm actually right now, I'm not operating with anybody. I'm doing consulting, but if I am in a position, I can tell you this is, by the way, that this is something I want to add to this, is that as much as a C-suite and the whole team and the senior leadership, middle management get together and they have these meetings, sometimes a fresh look from the outside makes a whole different story, because everybody is on the same frame. After a while, we all see the same thing. You're not seeing what's different. When someone comes from the outside, and by the way, I'm speaking now as a consultant. When you go to a company, you can see everything that's wrong easily. And it's, by the way, you see everything that's good, but it's very easy for you to see what is not working and where the little gaps are, because you're not there. You come in from the outside with a fresh perspective, and you can assess quickly, like, well, what about this? What about that? What about that? And when you are, it's like everything else. If we see something over and over, it becomes just natural. It's just daily activity. You're not seeing wrong when it's wrong, and you're not seeing right when it's right. Just you see it as what it is. But when you come in, so your work is very important. And again, to me, I endorse that, the idea that sometimes you do bring, and by the way, some true leaders will often bring someone from the outside to kind of just, hey, let's take a look at it and put it on the wall and see what's up. What are we doing here? What can we do to improve? Process improvement is a key element. And again, that's another one. When you're not really looking at that and you just live in the past, that's a problem. How can we go in from where we are today to the next level? And what's our 5 years plan, and so on and so forth? That's a big difference. Some leaders see it, some people are not. So, Doctor, anything you want to leave our audiences with today?
Go out there and improve things. If you're a leader, your job is to improve things.
Short and sweet. I love it. To the point. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us. It's been real. It's a pleasure and honor. Thank you for sharing your value there. I mean, there's so much there. I mean, I can't even thank you enough for it.
Well, I was happy to do it. Bye now.
Bye. Take it easy. And folks, this is the end of our show. Hope you enjoyed today. Do check out the site and connect and get all the nuggets and the insights that are available to you. And of course, do reach out to Dr. Henman and American Age. We'll be talking soon. New day, new show topic. Bye for now.